Unless you've been living as an island castaway for the last 40 years, you've heard that men have trouble with intimacy. It's a feminist factoid, proffering the idea that when it comes to deeper, more meaningful emotional connections, men are, shall we say, stuck at the shallow end of the pool. I set out to do a little research on this subject, and of course, checking Google for articles on men's problems with intimacy promptly led me to one at the Good Men Project, a website where they allow men to write and speak their mind, providing that the women who run the joint agree with them. This is where Bill Cloke enters the picture. That's Dr. Bill Cloke to you, and he's important enough to this discussion to introduce him through his bio on the Good Men Project website. It's important to know that this expert on men's defects has credentials backing his expertise. Or maybe it's just a reminder that you can be highly educated and still not know what the fuck you're talking about. I'll let you decide which is which after we examine his article ingeniously titled, Why Men Have Trouble with Intimacy. Anyway, that bio reads, Dr. Bill Cloke has worked with individuals and couples for 30 years. He received a master's degree in education from the University of Southern California and holds a PhD in psychology from California Graduate Institute. A frequent talk radio and TV psychologist, he is also a contributor to PsychologyToday.com, Care2.com, and other popular websites, and has lectured at UCLA. Bill Cloke lives with his wife in Los Angeles. Bill's book, Happy Together, has won the Nautilus and Benjamin Franklin Silver Awards for 2012. Okay, so there you have it. We are dealing with a bona fide expert on relationship problems, all of which he will predictably blame on men and masculinity, as is both fashionable and profitable for all the experts these days. The subtitle of the article is another revealing bit. Real intimacy, it says, unlike sex or hanging out, requires a vulnerability the man code prohibits. Okay, I'll refrain from any commentary on the condescension dripping from that line of text, except to say that you and I both already know where this is going. Before having read another line, I could tell you that we're about to get a diatribe on men and emotional retardation. Along with it will come a prescription for dude bros to be more like women, especially women who view them as inferior. These women are, after all, Cloke's real audience. So let's move on and take in Cloke's theories on the ill-fated man code that makes us all emotional humperdoos, unable to make meaningful, intimate connections. He starts out with a personal anecdote about a dinner he had with a group of couples. From this outing, he concludes, I shit you not, that one sign of men's ineptitude with intimacy is that they don't go to the bathroom together in social situations like women. Look, don't send me snarky emails about this. I'm just telling you what the man wrote. And what he wrote was bemoaning the fact that we don't huddle together and talk while taking a leak or squeezing one out. That was this PhD's primary indicator of the difference between men and women in the area of intimacy. And it bothers him, apparently, quite a bit. I think to myself, he says, that if a man got up and went to the restroom, no one would go with him. I'm thinking, no shit, Sherlock. No pun intended. Look, I'll let you make what you will of women going to the bathroom in groups. I don't want to even touch that subject, but I will say that if your idea of intimacy begins with sharing the trip to take a dump, I'm out. I mean, I know the point that Cloke was aiming at here, even though he missed the broad side of the outhouse. His anecdote selector is broken. Badly. His guy code never made it out of beta. What he's trying to say is that women exist in a collective, and he's right about that. The hive mind is real, but it has nothing to do with intimacy. Those women running in a pack to pee and talk amongst themselves away from men can claw each other's eyes out as easily as they can share a trip to the toilet. It's an action that means nothing and from which you shouldn't conclude anything meaningful. But hey, what do I know? Bill Cloke has a Ph.D. He goes on to take a less odoriferous stab at explaining men's reluctance to connect in the same way women do, using the predictably shop-worn feminist half-think about men and competition. The answer is that most men are taught from an early age to be competitive, he states, that feelings are a sign of weakness and to avoid vulnerability and dependency at all costs. And true to life, he has something worth examining here. Too bad he doesn't understand the very words he wrote. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're out to dinner with a group of couples. One man says, "I have to go potty." Another says, "Me too, let's all go." And all the men get up and go to the men's room together, standing around talking about feelings and other shit. Now imagine the absolute certainty that when they come back to the table, the women would be gone. And not to the little girl's room. They'd have Ubered their asses out of there in search of men they were attracted to. Remember how Cloak says that men are taught from an early age to be competitive, that feelings are a sign of weakness and to avoid vulnerability and dependency at all costs? Well, who the hell do you think it was that taught them that more than anyone else? You got it. Women. We train men to control their emotions, to remain strong and competitive for sure. They get that lesson from parents of both sexes, and when they come of age sexually, they get that lesson hammered in far harder from girls who will absolutely reject them if they don't display the stoicism, independence, and personal strength sufficient to make them a good provider. We teach men to be stoic, emotionally guarded, because without those features, their genetic line is a hell of a lot more likely to be at the end of the road. Not to mention the fact that refusing an emotionally centered existence has some other side effects, like landing on the moon, curing disease, building empires. Coincidentally, that's why it's men that do these things. But then I digress. Here's the rub. Cloak is just parroting the myopic idiocy of feminist dogma. He talks regularly throughout this article about what men are taught, about the messages that quote unquote we teach them about their feelings and emotional vulnerability. But there are two words that will never find their way into Cloak's writing, ever. And they are screaming out to be mentioned because they mean everything in this discussion. Those two words are sexual selection. That's the massive Texas-sized hole in the feminist half-think about men and women that has always been there, and which feminists of all stripes avoid talking about, or apparently even thinking about. It's the bloated and flatulent elephant in the room, stinking up the conversation about intimacy and all other matters related to the sexes. The only way you will ever get men who writ large emulate women's emotional existence is when you have women writ large who are sexually attracted to emotionally vulnerable men. In other words, never. This is what makes feminism, and by extension the entire field of modern psychology, one great big brain fart in the world of men and women. And it leads to a number of other fallacies, like the fallacy that women's way of processing their emotional experience is healthier than men's. You can moan all day about the supposedly unhealthy ways men handle their emotions as though it's something that could be changed on the half-assed advice of pop psychologists, and you'd get exactly nowhere. Let's pretend for an excruciating moment that you could snap your fingers and the stinky elephant would disappear, that suddenly no parent ever said big boys don't cry, that no one messaged boys with the idea that opening up with their feelings makes them weak and useless. You could wave a magic wand over that, make it all go away. Make all men touchy-feely go to the bathroom in groups and talk about their feelings like women, and it would not change the fact that women would have no sexual desire for the kind of man you've created. None at all. In fact, it would be just the opposite. What women would feel for the kind of man that misguided ideologues like Bill Cloke would create is disgust. Not just a lack of sexual interest, but bona fide, stomach-churning disgust. In fact, we have a name for it: pathogen disgust. I've linked to it in the description area below, but the gist of it is that women don't just see men wearing feelings on their sleeves as unmanly. They prove it by rejecting them and opting to have sex with men who don't. Sorry, Bill, but the crapola they taught you in the gender studies infected education of your discipline left out half the picture, the most important half, the half we call reality. And that leaves you crowing in places like the Good Men Project about the alleged shortcomings of men to an audience of women who by all measures look down their noses at them. And I use the word alleged for a reason. Throughout the rest of Bill Cloke's mini-screed, he repeatedly leans on the unscientific and insulting assumption that men would be better off if they acted like women. He shrouds his ideas in the worship of a woman's way of being and offers exactly nothing to serve as proof of its worthiness. He offers no studies that demonstrate that men who adopt an emotionally centered life are any less prone to suicide, addictions, or any of the other maladies that impact men more than women. Claiming that these things are caused by men's way of processing emotions is like claiming they are caused by facial hair and upper body strength. It's as simple as understanding, as any PhD should, but many don't, that correlation is not causation. And it reflects two major failings of so many people in the pseudo-mental health industry with impressive strings of alphabet behind their names. They are lazy and greedy. They'd rather write off men's issues to being broken versions of women than to take the time to understand men in compassionate and thoughtful ways. And the fact that they can make money doing so seals the deal. That's what birthed the model that men's biggest problem is that they aren't like women. And hucksters have been peddling that garbage since women lined up like hogs at the trough to feed on it. The fact that it hurts everyone and helps no one is irrelevant. It leaves people to the lamest of theories, like the idea that men's inadequacy is proven by the fact that they don't want to pee as a collective. That's what Bill Cloke sells to women, because his audience, his targeted demographic buys it, and because they would scream for his head if he ever told them the truth. In part 2 of this series, I'll be covering two indisputable facts. 1. There is nothing wrong with men's capacity for intimacy. They are quite capable of abundant and meaningful emotional connections, provided, of course, that you're not too obtuse to see it. And 2, it is women's capacity for intimacy that is challenged. At the end of the day, this day and all others, feminism's half-think about men and masculinity amount to a heap of denial and 3 measures of projection. It's women with shortcomings, personal and interpersonal failures that they must project onto men in order to see them. And of course, we're here, you and I, with red pills and reality, ready to call bullshit, no matter how high it's piled. As always, my brothers, I hope you've enjoyed this talk today, even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.